The stain on my hoodie was fake, but the humiliation I felt standing at the counter was entirely real. I watched as the store manager, a man I paid 6 figures a year, tossed the crumpled receipt back in my face. "We don't serve trash here," he sneered, turning his back on me. I turned to leave, defeated, until I stopped behind a rack of winter coats. That's when I heard it. A cackle. A high-five jeer. "Did you see him shaking? I bet that $40 was his rent money." They laughed. My blood ran cold. They thought they had just crushed a homeless man. They didn't know they had just declared war on the owner of the building. The 73rd floor of the Meridian Tower offered a view that most people only saw in movies. From my corner office, I could watch the entire city sprawl beneath me like a living map. Tiny cars crawling through gridlocked streets, construction cranes swinging lazily against the skyline, and somewhere down there, invisible from this height, the people who made my empire possible. My name is Elias Thorne, and I'm the CEO of Aurelia Clothiers, a luxury retail brand worth $3 billion. That number still felt surreal sometimes, especially when I caught my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows and saw the same face that once stared back at me from a homeless shelter bathroom mirror 30 years ago. I built this company from nothing. Literally nothing. At 25, I was sleeping in my car, working 3 jobs, and sketching suit designs on napkins during my graveyard shift at a gas station. The American dream wasn't handed to me on a silver platter. I had to steal the platter, melt it down, and forge it into something worth having. But success has a way of creating distance. The higher you climb, the further you get from the ground. "Mr. Thorne?" My assistant Rachel's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 10 o'clock is here. Send them in." Marcus Webb, my chief operations officer, entered with a tablet tucked under his arm, and that perpetual expression of controlled concern that expensive executives seem to master in business school. He was good at his job, maybe too good. He had a talent for making problems sound manageable even when they were catastrophic. "Morning, Elias." He settled into the leather chair across from my desk. "I've got the quarterly reports you requested. Let's hear it." Marcus swiped through several screens before finding what he wanted. Overall revenue is up 18% year over year. The new spring line is performing exceptionally well in the Asia-Pacific markets. European stores are steady. However, he paused, and that pause made my jaw tighten. "We're seeing some concerning trends in domestic customer satisfaction scores." Define concerning. The flagship store downtown has dropped from a 4.8 to a 3.2 rating in the past quarter. That's a catastrophic decline, Elias. We're getting complaints about staff rudeness, rejected returns, and what customers are describing as discriminatory treatment based on appearance. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me. And profits at that location? That's the strange part. Profits are actually up 22%. Regional Manager Derek Vance has been hitting every sales target we've set. His team's performance bonuses are going to be substantial this quarter. Something about that didn't sit right. High profits with low customer satisfaction was like a beautiful house built on a cracked foundation. Eventually, everything collapses. "What's our return rate at the flagship?" Marcus checked his tablet. 2.8%, well below the corporate cap of 3%. "And the other stores?" "Average is 4.1%. I stood up and walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cold glass. 73 floors below, people were living their lives, fighting their battles, trying to survive in a city that chewed up the weak and spit them out. I'd been one of those people once. "Marcus, do you know why I started this company?" He shifted uncomfortably. "You've mentioned your background in interviews. The poverty, the struggle." "I started this company," I interrupted, "because I wanted to create something dignified. When you're poor, Marcus, people treat you like you're invisible. They look through you. And on the rare occasions they do see you, they make sure you know exactly how little you matter." I turned to face him. "A good suit changes that. It gives you armor. It gives you respect. That's what Aurelia was supposed to be about, giving people dignity." "I understand, but do you?" "Because these numbers tell me that somewhere along the line, we forgot that mission. We're making money, sure, but we're doing it by making people feel small. That's not what I built." Marcus set down his tablet. "What do you want to do?" I looked out at the city again, at all those invisible people fighting invisible battles. "I'm going to visit the flagship store. I can arrange a formal inspection. We'll give them 48 hours notice, make sure everything is." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. No notice. No formal inspection. I'm going in undercover. Marcus blinked. I'm sorry, what? You heard me. I want to see what's really happening in that store. Not the sanitized version they'll show a CEO in a three-piece suit. I want to see how they treat someone who looks like they don't belong. Elias, that's highly irregular. And potentially dangerous. If something happens to you, then you'll be CEO, I said with a slight smile. Congratulations on the promotion. He didn't smile back. I'm being serious. We have protocols for this sort of thing. Audits, mystery shoppers, proper channels. Proper channels let Derek Vance turn my flagship store into a place where customer satisfaction has dropped 40% while he cashes bonus checks. Proper channels aren't working, Marcus. So I'm going to use improper ones. I could see him running calculations in his head, weighing the risks against the benefits, trying to find an argument that would change my mind. He wouldn't find one. When I made decisions like this, they weren't really decisions. They were inevitabilities. When? He finally asked. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I want to catch the opening shift. And your disguise? I thought about the clothes I'd worn 3 decades ago, before the suits and the success. The threadbare jeans, the stained hoodie, the shoes with holes in the soles that I'd packed with newspaper to keep my feet dry in the rain. I still have some old clothes in storage. From before. They'll do nicely. Marcus stood, recognizing defeat when he saw it. I'll keep my phone on. If you need extraction. I won't. I extended my hand. But thank you for caring. He shook it, still looking concerned, and left without another word. Alone again, I turned back to the window and the city below. Somewhere down there was the flagship store of Aurelia Clothiers, and inside that store were people who had forgotten what this company was supposed to stand for. Tomorrow, I would remind them. Tomorrow, I would become invisible again. The storage unit in the basement of my building smelled like dust and forgotten memories. I'd kept it for years, even after I could afford to throw everything away and start fresh. Some people collect art or vintage cars. I collected reminders of where I came from. The boxes were labeled in my own handwriting from 15 years ago. Old clothes, books, photos. I pulled down the one marked Old Clothes and carried it to the private bathroom adjacent to my office. Inside were the remnants of a life I'd fought desperately to escape. A pair of jeans with frayed hems and a permanent grease stain on the left thigh from when I'd worked as a mechanic's assistant. A gray hoodie that had once been black, its drawstrings missing, with a faded logo from a community college I'd attended for exactly 1 semester before running out of money. White sneakers that had turned yellowish-brown with age, the rubber soles separating from the canvas upper. I laid them out on the marble countertop like surgical instruments. The man in the mirror was Elias Thorne, CEO. Clean-shaven, with a $200 haircut and a Tom Ford suit that cost more than a used car. His hands were manicured. His skin had that healthy glow that comes from regular spa treatments and never worrying about where the next meal comes from. He wore a Patek Philippe watch that could feed a family for 6 months. He was a stranger. I started with the watch, slipping it off my wrist and placing it in my desk safe. Then the suit jacket, the silk tie, the custom-fitted shirt. Each piece of clothing I removed felt like shedding a layer of protection, exposing something vulnerable underneath. The jeans came next. They were tighter than I remembered. I'd put on muscle mass over the years, the kind that comes from personal trainers and premium gym memberships. But they still fit, barely. The hoodie swallowed me, hanging loose around my shoulders. I caught a whiff of something musty and old, like opening a time capsule. The shoes were the hardest part. Slipping my feet into those worn-out sneakers felt like stepping backward through time. I could almost feel the weight of all those years, all those struggles, pressing down on me again. I looked in the mirror. The stranger was gone. In his place stood someone familiar, a ghost from my past, a man who had been beaten down by life so many times that he'd learned to flinch before the blows even landed. But there was something missing. The man I used to be wasn't just poor, he was desperate, hungry. Tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. I rubbed my eyes until they were bloodshot. I mussed up my hair, running my fingers through it until the expensive cut became a shapeless mess. Then I went to the small kitchen area in my office and found a bottle of instant coffee. I poured some grounds into my palm and mixed it with water, creating a thin paste that I rubbed onto the front of the hoodie. The stain spread like a wound, dark and permanent. One final touch. I hadn't shaved this morning, and the stubble on my jaw was already visible. I used a straight razor to make it look more uneven, more neglected. Not the fashionable scruff of a man who chose to be unshaven, but the rough shadow of someone who couldn't afford to care. When I looked in the mirror again, I barely recognized myself. This was Arthur, a name I'd used in another life, before I became Elias Thorne. Arthur was nobody. Arthur was invisible. Arthur was exactly the kind of person that Derek Vance would dismiss without a second thought. Perfect. I grabbed a crumpled plastic bag from the trash, the kind you get from cheap convenience stores, and stuffed the shirt I intended to return inside. The shirt was from our premium collection, a $300 piece with a deliberately missing button that I'd removed myself. The receipt was legitimate. I'd had Rachel purchase it yesterday using cash. Everything was ready. I took one last look at the CEO in the expensive suit hanging in my closet, then I walked out of my office as Arthur, the invisible man. Rachel's eyes went wide when she saw me. Mr. Thorne? Are you? Don't wait up, I said, heading toward the private elevator. I might be gone for a while. The subway was something I hadn't experienced in 15 years. I'd forgotten the smell, that unique combination of metal, electricity, and human proximity. I'd forgotten the sound of wheels screeching on rails, the automated voice announcing stops, the rustling of newspapers, and the tinny leak of music from cheap headphones. Most of all, I'd forgotten the feeling of being pressed against strangers, all of us packed into the same metal tube hurtling through darkness toward our separate destinations. Nobody looked at me. This was the first test, and I was passing with flying colors. In my Tom Ford suit, people noticed me. They made eye contact, nodded, sometimes even smiled. In my stained hoodie and worn sneakers, I might as well have been a ghost. A woman in business attire stood next to me, gripping the overhead rail. Her briefcase knocked against my leg as the train lurched. She didn't apologize, didn't even seem to notice. When I shifted slightly to give her more room, she expanded into the space like water filling a container, unconscious of my existence. At the next stop, a teenage kid bumped into me hard enough to make me stumble. He glanced back, his eyes sliding over me without recognition or apology, and kept walking. Invisible. I emerged from the subway into the morning sunlight of the downtown shopping district. This was Aurelia territory. Our flagship store was 3 blocks away, surrounded by other luxury retailers that catered to people with more money than sense. Tiffany's, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and nestled among them, like a jewel in a crown, was my store. The building was beautiful. I designed it myself, working with an architect who understood that retail space should feel like a temple. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased our latest collections. The Aurelia logo, a stylized that looked like both a mountain peak and an arrow pointing upward, gleamed in gold above the entrance. Through the windows, I could see customers browsing. Wealthy men in their 50s examining suits. Young professionals eyeing our accessories. A well-dressed couple discussing something with a sales associate. I pushed through the brass-handled door. The interior was everything I'd envisioned. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Soft lighting that made everything glow. The subtle scent of sandalwood and cedar from our signature fragrance diffusers. Classical music playing at a volume that suggested sophistication rather than demanded attention. And the clothes. God, the clothes were beautiful. Each piece displayed like artwork, with space to breathe, to be appreciated. Suits in charcoal and navy and subtle pinstripes. Shirts in every shade of white and blue. Ties that cost more than some people's monthly rent. This was my cathedral, my monument to the idea that everyone deserved to feel dignified. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt the shift. The sales associate nearest to the door, a young man in his 20s wearing one of our slim-fit suits, looked up. His eyes landed on me, and I watched his expression change. The professional smile flickered. His gaze traveled from my face to my stained hoodie to my worn sneakers, and something closed off behind his eyes. He turned away without a word. I stood there for a moment, waiting. In my suit, someone would have greeted me within seconds. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Aurelia. Is there anything I can help you find today? But as Arthur, I received nothing, not even acknowledgement. I moved deeper into the store, my cheap sneakers squeaking slightly on the marble floor. Other customers gave me a wide berth, unconsciously stepping aside as I passed. I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the full-length mirrors, a shabby figure in an expensive space, as out of place as a cockroach at a wedding. Near the dress shirts, I saw her. She was young, maybe 22, 23, with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her name tag read Sarah Jenkins. Unlike the other staff members I'd passed, she was actively helping a customer, an elderly black man who was examining a blue Oxford shirt with uncertain fingers. "This would look wonderful on you," Sarah was saying, her voice warm and genuine. "The color brings out your eyes. And see here? The collar is designed to maintain its shape without starch, so it's very easy to care for." The man smiled, but there was hesitation in his expression. "It's a bit more than I usually spend." "I understand completely," Sarah replied without missing a beat. "But this is an investment piece. Quality fabric, reinforced stitching. This shirt will last you years with proper care. And we're actually running a promotion right now. Buy 2 dress shirts, get 20% off your total purchase." "I only need 1 shirt, though." "Well, maybe you know someone who could use a nice shirt? A son, a nephew, a friend? You could split the discount." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, that's what I did when my brother needed interview clothes. We coordinated our purchases and both saved money." The man's face brightened. "You know, my grandson has a job interview next week. He's about my size." I watched Sarah help him select a second shirt, taking her time to ensure both choices worked for both men. She never once rushed him, never once made him feel foolish for his hesitation or his budget concerns. Then I saw him approach. Derek Vance was exactly what I expected from his employee file photo. Tall, with the kind of aggressive handsomeness that came from good genetics and expensive grooming. His suit was immaculate, one of our premium 3-piece models in charcoal gray. His shoes were polished to a gloss. His hair was styled with product that probably cost more per ounce than gold. He strode toward Sarah and her customer with the purposeful gait of someone who believed the world should part before him. "Sarah." His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "A word." "Now." Sarah's smile faltered. She glanced at her customer apologetically. "I'll be right back, Mr. Harrison. Let me just—" "Now, Sarah." The elderly gentleman, Mr. Harrison, took a step back, suddenly uncomfortable. Sarah set down the shirts and followed Derek toward the back of the store, near the fitting rooms. I drifted in that direction, pretending to examine a rack of ties while listening. "How many times do I have to tell you?" Derek's voice was low but intense, the kind of controlled anger that's somehow worse than shouting. "We don't waste time on browsers. That old man isn't going to buy anything. Look at him. Look at his shoes, his watch. He's killing time, and you're letting him kill your sales numbers. Mr. Vance, he's purchasing 2 shirts. 2 shirts at our mid-range price point. Congratulations, you've just spent 15 minutes of company time to make a sale that barely covers your hourly wage." Meanwhile, there's a woman in the accessories section who came in wearing Prada, and nobody's helping her because you're too busy playing social worker. "I'm sorry, I just thought." You're not paid to think. You're paid to sell. And you sell to people who look like they have money to spend. He jabbed a finger toward Mr. Harrison. "That is not our target demographic. That is someone who wandered in off the street and is wasting our resources. Do you understand?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, Mr. Vance." "Good. Now go ring him up as quickly as possible and then focus on actual customers. I'm watching your numbers, Sarah. You're already in the bottom quartile for the month. 1 more week like this, and we'll need to have a serious conversation about your future here." He walked away, leaving Sarah standing there with her shoulders slightly hunched, like someone who'd just been slapped. I felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. This was my company, my vision. And this predator in an expensive suit was perverting everything I'd built, turning it into exactly the kind of place that had once made me feel worthless. Sarah returned to Mr. Harrison with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. "I'm so sorry about that. Let's get you checked out." I watched her ring up the sale, watched her maintain her kindness despite Derek's cruelty, and I made a decision. She was the hero in this story. Derek Vance was the villain. And I was about to become something else entirely. I was about to become the test that would reveal exactly what kind of place my flagship store had become. I pulled the shirt from my plastic bag and walked toward the service counter. The service counter stood at the back of the store, a sleek marble desk with a polished brass sign that read, "Returns Customer Service," in elegant script. Sarah had just finished with Mr. Harrison, who left with his purchase and a genuine smile when I approached. She looked up, and for a moment, I saw the fatigue in her eyes. The encounter with Derek had taken something from her, some essential spark. But when she saw me, the professional mask clicked into place. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you today?" Up close, I could see details I'd missed from across the store. Her name tag was slightly crooked. There was a small stain on her sleeve, coffee, probably from this morning. Her hands, I noticed, trembled slightly as she straightened a stack of business cards on the counter. She was nervous. Not of me specifically, but of something. Of making a mistake. Of Derek's watchful eyes. Of losing a job she desperately needed. I recognized that fear. I'd lived it. "I need to return this," I said, pulling the shirt from the plastic bag and laying it on the counter. The fabric was pristine, our premium Egyptian cotton blend in crisp white. The only flaw was the missing button on the right cuff, a defect I'd created deliberately. Sarah picked up the shirt, her fingers professional and careful as she examined it. "May I ask the reason for the return?" "There's a button missing. And it was a gift, but it's not really my style. I need the money back for something else." The truth in that statement surprised me. Even in my disguise, even playing a role, there was honesty in those words. The money wasn't for me. It was for this test, this revelation, this reckoning. Sarah found the missing button immediately. "I see. I'm so sorry about this defect. That's absolutely unacceptable quality control on our part." She looked up at me with genuine concern. "Do you have your receipt?" I pulled out the crumpled paper from my pocket. "Yeah, here." She took it, her eyes scanning the details. "This was purchased 2 days ago, so we're well within our return window. Let me just—" She paused, looking at me more carefully. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to pry, but are you sure you want to return this? It's a really beautiful shirt, and we could easily replace the button for you. It would only take a few minutes, and then you'd have a perfect shirt." There was no judgment in her voice, no condescension, just honest concern, as if she genuinely wanted to help me make the best decision. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. "But I really need the cash right now. Times are kind of hard." Understanding flickered in her eyes. Not pity, understanding. "I completely get it. I've been there." She began typing into the computer. "The return will be $42.99, same as the purchase price. Would you like that back on the original payment method? Or cash would be better, if that's okay." "Absolutely. Let me just process this, and is there a problem here?" The voice came from behind me, and I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Derek Vance's tone carried that particular combination of authority and contempt that people use when they want to make it clear you're beneath them. I turned slowly. He was standing about 6 feet away, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression somewhere between annoyance and disgust. "No problem, Mr. Vance," Sarah said quickly. "I'm just processing a return." "I can see that." His eyes traveled over me with the speed and precision of a machine designed to calculate worth. Stained hoodie, worthless. Worn sneakers, worthless. Plastic bag instead of a shopping tote, worthless. The math took him less than 2 seconds, and the verdict was written clearly on his face. "Sir, what seems to be the issue with the merchandise?" "There's a button missing," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I'd like to return it for a refund." Derek stepped closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and overpowering, the olfactory equivalent of a firm handshake designed to remind you who's in charge. He picked up the shirt, examined it for perhaps 3 seconds, then set it down with a dismissive gesture. "I'm afraid we can't accept this return." Sarah's typing stopped. "But Mr. Vance, the defect is clearly—" "Sarah, I'll handle this." He turned his full attention to me, and I saw the machinery of prejudice working behind his eyes. "Sir, our return policy is very clear. We require returns to be in new, unworn condition. This shirt shows signs of wear." "I never wore it," I said. "It was a gift. I'm returning it in the same condition it was purchased." "The missing button suggests otherwise. It's likely you wore the shirt, lost the button through normal use, and are now attempting to return it fraudulently." The word fraudulently hung in the air like a slap. "I have the receipt," I said, feeling Arthur's desperation creeping into my voice. "It was purchased 2 days ago. The button was missing when it was bought. Your quality control missed it." Derek's smile was cold and sharp. "Sir, I've been in retail management for 8 years. I know the difference between a manufacturing defect and customer damage. This button was torn off, not missing from the factory. You can see the thread remnants. He pointed to the cuff, where I had indeed left some thread after removing the button. That's evidence of use and damage. I didn't damage it. I'm afraid I don't believe you. The words were quiet, almost polite, but they carried the weight of absolute judgment. In Derek Vance's world, I was a liar because I looked like someone who would lie. My appearance was evidence. My poverty was proof. Mr. Vance, Sarah interjected, her voice shaking slightly. The receipt is valid, and the return is within policy. We should. Sarah, if you complete this transaction, I will write you up for violating company policy. That will be your second write-up this month. One more, and you're terminated. Do you understand? I watched the color drain from Sarah's face. Her hands, still poised over the keyboard, began to tremble more visibly. But he has a receipt, which he probably forged or obtained fraudulently. Look at him, Sarah. Does he look like someone who shops at Aurelia? Does he look like someone who receives expensive shirts as gifts? Derek leaned against the counter, his body language screaming dominance. We have a responsibility to protect this company from scammers and thieves. And I'm not going to let some homeless person con us out of $40 on your watch. Homeless person. The word struck like a physical blow, and I had to remind myself that this was exactly what I'd come here to discover. This was the truth beneath the marble floors and the sandalwood scent and the beautiful clothes. This was what Aurelia had become. Please, I said, and I didn't have to fake the emotion in my voice. I really need this money. It's not a scam. I have the receipt. The shirt has a defect. I'm following your policy. Our policy, Derek interrupted, is to serve our valued customers. And you, sir, are not a valued customer. You're someone who wandered in off the street, hoping to exploit our generous return policy. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not going to happen today. He picked up my receipt, and for a moment, I thought he was going to hand it back to me. Instead, he tore it in half. Then in half again. The pieces fluttered to the counter like snow. Your receipt is damaged and therefore invalid. I'm afraid we can't process your return. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store now. If you refuse, I'll call security. Sarah made a small sound, almost like a gasp. I stared at the torn pieces of paper, at the casual cruelty of the gesture, and felt something ancient and cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just bad customer service. This wasn't just a manager having a bad day. This was calculated, deliberate, evil wearing an expensive suit. You can't do this, I said quietly. I just did. Now leave, before I have you removed. I looked at Sarah. Her eyes were wide, shocked, horrified. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, trapped between her conscience and her need to keep her job. I gathered the torn receipt pieces and the shirt, stuffing them back into my plastic bag with shaking hands that weren't entirely acting. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered as I turned to leave. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Derek's voice, loud enough to carry. Sarah, my office. Now, we need to discuss your judgment and your future with this company. I pushed through the brass-handled door and into the morning sunlight, my heart pounding with rage so intense I could taste copper on my tongue. But I didn't leave. Instead, I circled around to the side of the building, to a recessed doorway that gave me a clear view through the windows but kept me out of the main sight line. I needed to see what happened next. I needed to witness every crime. Because when judgment came, and it would come soon, I wanted to remember exactly what I was avenging. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched Derek march Sarah toward the back of the store. Other employees glanced their way, then quickly looked away. The universal body language of people who've learned that getting involved only makes you the next target. I couldn't hear what they were saying anymore, but I didn't need to. Derek's posture told the story, rigid spine, jabbing finger, the territorial stance of someone establishing dominance. Sarah's shoulders were hunched, her head down, absorbing the verbal assault like someone used to weathering storms. My phone was in my pocket, and I pulled it out with fingers that still trembled with suppressed rage. A text to Marcus. Need full employee files for flagship store. Derek Vance, Chloe Miller, Sarah Jenkins. Everything. Send to my secure email. Now. His response came within seconds. Done. Are you okay? I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what okay meant anymore. From my vantage point, I watched the morning traffic of the store. A young couple entered, probably in their late 20s, dressed in the casual luxury of tech money, designer jeans, expensive sneakers, minimalist watches that cost more than wedding rings. They browsed the suits section, and immediately two sales associates materialized beside them like genies summoned by wealth. An older woman in a business suit examined scarves near the window. She was helped within 30 seconds. A man who looked like he'd walked off a yacht received assistance before he'd even finished entering the store. The pattern was clear and consistent. Wealth attracted service like gravity. Then the door opened again, and I watched a young man shuffle in. He was probably around 19 or 20, wearing a uniform from a fast food restaurant with grease stains on his shirt. He looked nervous, uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the expensive space, as if searching for permission to exist there. He made his way to the dress shirts, the same section where I'd watched Sarah help Mr. Harrison, and began examining a white Oxford with the kind of careful attention that suggested he was counting every dollar in his head. No one approached him. Minutes passed. The young man picked up a shirt, checked the price tag, set it down. Picked up another, repeated the process. He was clearly looking for something specific, probably for a job interview or a special occasion, trying to balance quality with a budget that wouldn't stretch far. Still, no one helped. Finally, he approached the nearest sales associate, the same young man who'd looked through me when I'd entered. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could read the body language. The question was brief. The associate's response was even briefer, accompanied by a gesture toward the price tags that clearly meant, read it yourself. No offer of assistance. No suggestion of alternatives. Just the minimum interaction required to avoid being outright rude. The young man nodded, thanked him, and went back to browsing alone. This was the culture Derek had created. This was the Aurelio way. Under his leadership, serve the wealthy with enthusiasm, treat everyone else with contempt or indifference. I was watching my dream rot from the inside. My phone buzzed. An email from Marcus with 3 attachments. I opened the first one, Derek Vance's employee file. Regional manager, hired 4 years ago. Previously worked at luxury retailers in New York and Los Angeles. Performance reviews, exceptional. Sales targets, consistently exceeded. Customer satisfaction, declining over past year. Commendations, multiple. Complaints, 7 filed, all dismissed as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. 7 complaints, all dismissed. I opened the complaints folder and began reading. The stories were variations on the same theme. Refused to help me because I was wearing casual clothes. Made me feel unwelcome because I asked about payment plans. Treated me like a criminal when I tried to return a damaged item. Laughed at me when I said the prices were outside my budget. 7 voices crying out for help, for justice, for basic human dignity. And every single time, corporate had sided with Derek because his numbers were good, because profits trump people, because the machine runs smoothly as long as the gears don't squeak too loudly. I opened Sarah's file next. Sales associate, hired 8 months ago. Single mother, 1 child, age 3. Previous employment, retail, food service, childcare. Education, high school diploma, some college, interrupted due to financial constraints. Performance reviews, good to excellent. Customer satisfaction, consistently high. Notes, compassionate with customers. Sometimes spends too much time with lower value transactions. There it was. Lower value transactions. Corporate speak for poor people. The phrase made me sick. At the bottom of Sarah's file was a note from Derek dated 2 weeks ago. Employee counseling session conducted. Sarah Jenkins has been warned about time management and prioritization of high-value customers. Further improvement needed or termination will be considered. She was being punished for being kind. The third file was Chloe Miller, the assistant manager I hadn't met yet. Her record was a carbon copy of Derek's. High sales, low satisfaction. A trail of complaints all swept under the rug. I was about to close my phone when I saw movement through the window. Derek had emerged from the back office, and there was a woman with him, mid-20s, blonde, wearing a fitted dress and a smile that looked sharp enough to cut. Chloe Miller. They were walking together toward the service counter, and something about their body language made me pause. They were too comfortable, too familiar. Not inappropriate exactly, but there was a camaraderie there that spoke of shared secrets, shared jokes at others' expense. They reached the counter, looked around to make sure no customers were nearby, and then Derek said something that made Chloe laugh. A high, sharp sound that carried through the glass. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see Derek mimicking something, his hands shaking in an exaggerated motion. He was acting out someone's fear, someone's humiliation. He was acting out me. Chloe laughed again, covering her mouth with her hand in mock horror. Then Derek held up his hand, and she high-fived him. They were celebrating the destruction of a human being's dignity. My blood went cold, then hot, then cold again. The rage I'd been suppressing crystallized into something harder, more focused. This wasn't just about bad management anymore. This wasn't just about corporate culture. This was about fundamental cruelty. About people who derived pleasure from hurting others. I activated the voice recorder on my phone and moved closer to the window, pressing against the glass, straining to hear. Derek's voice drifted through, muffled but audible. Did you see his hands? Shaking like a leaf. Probably haven't eaten in days. Chloe, I thought he was going to cry when you tore up the receipt. God, that was brilliant, Derek. Truly brilliant. It's necessary. These people need to learn that Aurelia isn't their charity shop. We're a luxury brand, not a soup kitchen. Still, $40. Think that was his rent money. They both laughed. I kept recording, my hands steady despite the fury coursing through me. Derek continued. You know what the best part is? Corporate set our return cap at 3% for the quarter. We're currently at 2.8%. Every return we reject keeps us under that cap, and if we stay there through month end, we all get the platinum bonus. How much is platinum again? $15,000 each, plus the quarterly bonus pool distribution based on profit margins. Chloe whistled. So by making that homeless guy feel like trash, you just made us 15 grand richer. Exactly. And between you and me, I've been doing this all quarter. That old woman last week with the walker, the one trying to return the coat, saved us $200 by rejecting her return. She literally cried, Chloe. Stood right there and cried, and walked out with a defective product because she was too confused to fight back. Derek, you're terrible. But she was smiling when she said it, the kind of smile that meant, you're terrible, and I love it. I'm practical. You know how many homeless people try to scam us? How many poor students try to game the system? If we accepted every sob story, we'd be out of business. I'm protecting this company. I'm protecting our bonuses. And if some people get their feelings hurt along the way, well, maybe they should shop somewhere more appropriate to their income level. I had everything I needed. Every word. Every laugh. Every confession of calculated cruelty. They thought they were alone, that their crimes were private conversations between conspirators. They didn't know they were confessing in front of a judge who was about to deliver a sentence. I stopped the recording and slipped my phone back into my pocket. Then I walked away from the window, away from the store, away from the flagship location of Aurelia Clothiers. But I would be back, and when I returned, I would not be invisible anymore. I needed to think, to plan, but more than that, I needed to master the rage that threatened to consume me. So I walked. The downtown shopping district blurred around me as my feet carried me through streets I'd helped make prosperous. Every third storefront seemed to be some luxury brand, each one a monument to excess and exclusivity. And somewhere in my chest, a question burned. Was this what I'd built? Had I climbed out of poverty only to create new walls to keep the poor out? My phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Elias, where are you? I'm getting worried. Please respond. I typed back. I'm fine. Preparing for phase 2. Clear my schedule for the next 48 hours. I'm going to fix this. His response was immediate. What are you planning? Justice. I typed back, then turned off my phone. I found myself in front of a small cafe, the kind of place I used to frequent before I could afford better, before I became the kind of person who drank $12 lattes in bistros with mood lighting and servers who knew my usual order. I went inside and ordered black coffee. The barista looked at my stained hoodie and worn sneakers and didn't even try to upsell me on a pastry. Just took my $2, poured the coffee, and slid it across the counter without a word. I sat in a corner booth and pulled out the recorder, listening to Derek and Chloe's conversation again. Each word was a nail in their coffin, but I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. The platinum bonus. That was the key. They weren't just being cruel for cruelty's sake, although that was certainly part of it. They were gaming the system, deliberately rejecting valid returns to manipulate their profit margins and trigger performance bonuses. It was fraud, plain and simple. Corporate fraud wrapped in classism and cruelty. I opened my laptop, a burner I kept for situations like this, and logged into the corporate network using my CEO credentials. Within minutes, I had access to the flagship store's return data for the past quarter. The pattern was damning. In January and February, the return rate was normal, 4.2% and 4.1% respectively. But in March, it dropped to 2.9%. And in April, the current month, it was at 2.8% and falling. I cross-referenced this against Derek's employment anniversary. He'd been promoted to regional manager in January. The drop in returns coincided exactly with his promotion. Next, I pulled up the complaints filed against the flagship store. There had been 37 in the past 3 months. 37 customers who'd been treated poorly enough to take the time to file formal complaints. But only 7 had made it up the chain to corporate HR. The other 30 had been resolved at the store level by Derek himself. I could imagine those resolutions: intimidation, dismissal, the implicit threat that complaining would only make things worse. This wasn't just one bad manager. This was systemic rot enabled by a corporate structure that valued profits over people. My coffee went cold as I worked, pulling data, cross-referencing sales figures with customer satisfaction scores, building a case that would be undeniable. By the time I finished, I had a complete picture. Derek Vance had turned the flagship store into a machine designed to extract maximum profit while providing minimum service to anyone who didn't meet his visual standards of wealth. He'd systematically rejected valid returns, bullied his staff into compliance, and created a culture where cruelty was rewarded and kindness was punished. And the worst part? Corporate had let it happen. They'd seen the declining satisfaction scores, received the complaints, and done nothing because the profits were good. I'd let it happen. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been so focused on expansion, on growth, on building an empire, that I'd lost sight of the foundation. I'd trusted middle management to uphold the values I'd founded the company on, and they'd betrayed that trust. But the responsibility was mine. I stood up, leaving the cold coffee behind, and walked back out into the afternoon sunlight. The flagship store was 5 blocks away, and I could feel its presence like a wound that needed cleaning. Time for phase 2. I walked back to the store, but this time I didn't go in. Instead, I positioned myself across the street where I could watch the entrance without being obvious. I needed to see the full scope of operations, to witness every interaction, to build an ironclad case. Over the next 3 hours, I watched 47 people enter the store. 31 of them were greeted immediately and helped enthusiastically. 16 were either ignored or given cursory attention. The division was stark and visible. Well-dressed customers received service. Everyone else received tolerance at best, contempt at worst. I watched a young woman in scrubs, probably a nurse or medical assistant, browse the women's section for 20 minutes before finally giving up and leaving without a single employee offering help. I watched a middle-aged man in a mechanic's uniform ask for assistance at the service counter, only to be told curtly that we don't carry work clothes. I watched a college student with a backpack and budget laptop get followed by security as if he were a shoplifter, the guard staying exactly 3 steps behind him until the kid got uncomfortable enough to leave. Every interaction was a small cruelty. Every dismissal was a rejection of the values I'd founded this company on. And through the windows, I could see Derek moving through the store like a king surveying his kingdom, stopping occasionally to talk with staff, his body language radiating authority and approval when they made sales to desirable customers, and cold displeasure when they wasted time on the wrong people. Near closing time, I saw Sarah again. She was helping an elderly Asian woman select a gift for her grandson, taking her time, showing her different options, treating her with the same care she'd shown Mr. Harrison. And I saw Derek watching her, his expression dark with disapproval. When Sarah finished the sale, a modest one, probably $100, Derek intercepted her on her way to the register. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to. His jabbing finger, her shrinking posture, the way she nodded quickly and hurried to complete the transaction, it told me everything. She was being punished again. For being kind. For being human. That was when I made my final decision. Tomorrow, I would return. Not as Arthur, the invisible man. Not as the victim of Derek's cruelty. Tomorrow, I would return as Elias Thorne, CEO of Aurelia Clothiers. And there would be a reckoning. That evening, I returned to my office on the 73rd floor. The city lights spread beneath me like fallen stars, each one a life, a story, a struggle invisible from this height. I'd spent the day being invisible, and now I was back in the tower, looking down at the world from which I'd come and to which, in some essential way, I still belonged. Marcus was waiting in my office, pacing near the windows. He spun around when I entered, relief and anger warring on his face. Jesus Christ, Elias. You've been gone for 12 hours. I was about to call the police. I walked to my desk and set down my laptop. I'm fine. Fine? You look like you've been through a war. I glanced at my reflection in the dark window. He was right. Arthur's clothes, Arthur's stubble, Arthur's exhaustion, they were all still there, but underneath them was something else. Something harder. Something forged in the fire of what I'd witnessed. I've seen enough, I said quietly. More than enough. And I played him the recording. All of it. Derek's mocking of my fear, Chloe's laughter, the confession of systematic fraud, the celebration of cruelty. Marcus's face went pale, then red, then pale again. My God, he whispered when it finished. Elias, we need to call legal immediately. This is fraud. This is discrimination. This is my fault. The words stopped him cold. What? My fault, Marcus. I built this company on the idea that everyone deserves dignity, and then I got too busy being CEO to notice when that idea died. I trusted the system to regulate itself, and the system failed. I let this happen. You didn't let anything happen. You have thousands of employees, hundreds of locations. You can't personally oversee. I can when it's my flagship store showing a 40% drop in customer satisfaction. I can when there are complaints piling up. I can when the numbers themselves are screaming that something's wrong. I sat down heavily in my chair. I saw the reports, Marcus. I saw the declining scores. And I did nothing because the profits were good. I chose money over people. Just like Derek. That's not true, isn't it? Be honest with me. How many times have we gotten complaints about stores, and our response was to look at the profit margins? How many times have we promoted managers based solely on sales figures without considering how they achieve those sales? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, too many times. Exactly. This rot goes deeper than Derek Vance. It goes to the core of how we've been operating. We've created a system that rewards cruelty as long as it's profitable. So what do you want to do? I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. Somewhere down there was the flagship store, dark now, closed for the night. And inside that store, tomorrow morning, Derek and Chloe would arrive expecting another day of business as usual. They were wrong. Tomorrow morning, I said, I'm going back to the store. But this time, I won't be alone. I want you there. I want legal there. I want HR there. And I want every shred of evidence we can gather about Derek's operation. The rejected returns, the complaints, the manipulated numbers, everything. You're going to fire him. I'm going to do more than that. I'm going to make an example of what happens when you pervert everything this company stands for. Marcus nodded slowly. And Sarah Jenkins. I thought about the young woman I'd watched all day, the one who'd maintained her kindness despite being punished for it, who'd helped customers because it was right even when it cost her. Sarah gets promoted. I want her managing that store. And I want every employee who's been complicit in Derek's culture either retrained or removed. We're going to burn out this rot completely. This is going to cause waves, Elias. Derek's well-connected in the retail world. His family has money. He'll lawyer up, fight back, possibly sue. Let him. I have his confession on tape. I have documentation of systematic fraud. I have 37 customer complaints. He can hire every lawyer in the city, and he'll still lose. I turn to face Marcus. And even if by some miracle he wins in court, he'll lose in the court of public opinion. I'll make sure the whole world knows what kind of person he is. That's pretty ruthless. I learned from the best, I said with a thin smile. I build a company by being ruthless with competitors. Tomorrow, I'm going to be ruthless with something I should have fought a long time ago. The idea that wealth determines worth. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'll start making calls. Legal, HR, security. Who else do you want there? The regional director who hired Derek. I want to know how this happened, how someone this toxic slipped through our screening. That's Amanda Chun. She's actually been flagging concerns about Derek for months, but they were overridden by the VP of sales because Derek's numbers were too good. Of course they were. The system had worked exactly as designed, Protecting the profitable predator because profits mattered more than people. Get Amanda there too. And the VP of sales. I want everyone who enabled this to watch it end. Elias, what exactly are you planning? I thought about Derek's performance earlier, the way he'd torn up my receipt, the way he'd threatened Sarah, the way he'd celebrated crushing someone he thought was homeless. I'm planning to give Derek exactly what he gave me. A very public humiliation. He made a show of destroying someone he thought was powerless. Tomorrow, I'm going to show him what happens when you don't know who you're really dealing with. And if he recognizes you? If he realizes Arthur was you before you're ready to reveal it? He won't. People like Derek don't see past surfaces. To him, Arthur was trash. Elias Thorne is a CEO. His brain won't make the connection because his prejudice won't allow it. That's his weakness, Marcus. He can't imagine that someone in a stained hoodie could possibly be someone important. I walked to my closet and pulled out my most expensive suit, a custom Brioni in midnight blue that cost more than most people made in a month. I laid it out on the couch, a stark contrast to Arthur's clothes still hanging on my body. Tomorrow, I said, Derek Vance is going to learn a very expensive lesson about judging books by their covers. Marcus looked at the suit, then at me, then at the recording device on my desk. This is going to be brutal. Good. He deserves brutal. They all do. I meant brutal for you too. You're going to have to face the fact that this happened under your leadership, that the company you built allowed this. That's going to be hard, Elias. He was right. The anger I felt toward Derek was nothing compared to the shame I felt toward myself. I'd been so focused on the view from the 73rd floor that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be on the ground. But shame could be useful. Shame could drive change. I can handle hard, I said. What I can't handle is knowing that somewhere right now, there's someone like the person I used to be, someone struggling and scared, walking into one of my stores and being treated like garbage. I can't handle knowing that we're part of the problem instead of part of the solution. Then we fix it. No, Marcus. Tomorrow, we start fixing it. This is going to take years. A complete cultural overhaul. New policies, new training, new metrics that measure kindness alongside profit. We're going to have to rebuild this company from the ground up while it's still operating. That sounds impossible. So did building a billion-dollar company from the back seat of a 1987 Honda Civic. But I did that too. I looked at him. Are you with me? Because this is going to be messy. We're going to lose managers who don't want to change. We might lose shareholders who only care about quarterly returns. We might take a hit to our stock price. This is going to cost us in every measurable way. Marcus didn't hesitate. I'm with you. I didn't join this company to help rich people get richer. I joined because I believed in what you said in that first pitch meeting, that everyone deserves to feel dignified, that a good suit is armor against a world that judges too quickly. If we've lost that mission, then yeah, we need to find it again. I extended my hand, and he shook it. Then get some sleep, I said. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He left, and I was alone again with the city lights and my thoughts. I stripped off Arthur's clothes and showered, washing away the grime and the stains and the smell of poverty. But even clean, even standing in a bathroom made of marble and gold fixtures, I couldn't wash away the feeling of what I'd experienced. The invisibility, the dismissal, the cruelty. For one day, I'd been Arthur again, and the world had shown me exactly how it treated people like Arthur. Tomorrow, the world would see Elias Thorne, and Elias Thorne was going to show them exactly how he treated people like Derek Vance. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and lay down in my bed, a bed that cost more than Sarah probably made in 3 months, and tried to sleep. But all I could hear was that laughter. That cruel, triumphant laughter. Not for much longer, I thought. Not for much longer. I woke before the alarm, my body humming with the kind of focused energy that comes before important battles. The city was still dark, the sun just a promise on the eastern horizon. The Brioni suit fit like it was painted on, every line perfect, every detail speaking of wealth and power. The shoes were Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine. The watch was a Patek Philippe, the same one I'd removed yesterday before becoming Arthur. But this time, I added one more thing, a small lapel pin. Custom-made, simple, just the Aurelia logo in gold. When I looked in the mirror, Elias Thorne looked back. CEO, billionaire, the man who'd built an empire, the man who'd let that empire rot. Not anymore. By 6 a.m., I was in my office. Marcus arrived at 6:30 with a full briefing folder. Legal's ready. he said, setting down a stack of documents. These are the employment contracts for Derek Vance and Chloe Miller, along with the termination protocols. HR has reviewed everything. We're covered legally for immediate termination with cause based on the fraud evidence alone. The discrimination and harassment just make it ironclad. Good. What about the recordings? Legal says they're admissible. New York is a one-party consent state for recordings, and since you were one of the parties being discussed, you had every right to record. If Derek tries to sue, this will destroy him in court. I flipped through the documents. Everything was there, the evidence, the legal justifications, the protocols for what would happen after the termination. Amanda Chun? I asked. She'll be there. And Elias. You should know that she's been trying to warn corporate about Derek for 8 months. She filed 3 separate reports about his behavior, but they were all dismissed by the VP of Sales. Let me guess. Because Derek's numbers were too good. Exactly. Amanda's actually been documenting everything. She kept copies of all the complaints that Derek resolved at the store level. She's been building a case to present to the board. So there were good people in the system too. People who tried to fight the rot. Amanda Chun had done what I should have done, paid attention, investigated, refused to let profits blind her to people. Make sure Amanda knows I want to speak with her after this is over. She deserves better than being overridden by people who only see dollar signs. Will do. The VP of Sales, Richard Fordham, is also being summoned. He's not happy about it. I don't care if he's happy. He's the one who enabled this. He's going to watch it end. And then we're going to have a very serious conversation about his future with this company. Marcus checked his watch. The store opens at 9. What time do you want to arrive? 8:45. I want Derek to see me walk in. I want him to have time to wonder who I am and what I'm doing there before I destroy his world. That's cold, Elias. It's justice. There's a difference. At 8 a.m., I received a text from the head of corporate security, team in position. Flagship's store surrounded. Security footage from yesterday has been secured and backed up to 3 separate servers. No chance of tampering. Everything was coming together. At 8:30, my phone rang. It was Amanda Chun. Mr. Thorne? This is Amanda. I just wanted to say, thank you for finally doing something about Derek. I was starting to think nobody was listening. I should have listened sooner, I said. That's on me. But I promise you, Amanda, what happens today is just the beginning. We're going to fix this company. All of it. I'm glad. Really glad. Because this industry, it can be so toxic. And Aurelia was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be better. It will be. Starting today. I hung up and took a final look at myself in the mirror. Elias Thorne, armor on, ready for war. Marcus met me at the private elevator. Security is ready. Legal is ready. HR is ready. The car is waiting. Then let's go. The drive to the flagship store took 15 minutes. I sat in the back of the town car, watching the city wake up around me. People heading to work, grabbing coffee, living their lives. How many of them had been treated like I was treated yesterday? How many had walked into a store hoping for help and left feeling like trash? Too many. The car pulled up to the store at exactly 8:45 a.m. Through the windows, I could see the staff preparing for opening, straightening displays, turning on lights, getting ready for another day of business as usual. Derek was there, visible through the glass, adjusting his tie in a mirror. He looked confident, comfortable, like a man who'd never faced consequences for his actions. That was about to change. Marcus opened the door for me, and I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The morning sun caught the Aurelia logo above the entrance, making it gleam gold. My store. My name. My responsibility. Ready? Marcus asked quietly. More than ready. I walked toward the door, flanked by Marcus on one side and 2 corporate security officers on the other. Behind us, a black SUV pulled up, and Amanda Chun stepped out, followed by Richard Fordham and 2 attorneys from legal. We were a procession, a delegation, an army. And inside that store, Derek Vance had no idea that his kingdom was about to fall. I reached the brass handles and pulled the door open. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. The store was in its pre-opening mode, that transitional state where everything is ready but not quite official yet. Staff members were scattered throughout, doing last-minute preparations. All movement stopped when they saw me. It wasn't just me, of course. It was the entire entourage, Marcus, security, legal, Amanda, even Richard Fordham looking uncomfortable in an expensive suit. We created an instant vacuum of attention, all eyes turning toward the door. Derek was near the service counter, and I watched the calculation happen in his mind. Unknown man in expensive suit. Corporate security presence. Serious faces. Something important was happening, and his salesman's instinct kicked in immediately. He straightened his tie, put on his most professional smile, and started walking toward us. "Good morning," he said, extending his hand as he approached. "Derek Vance, regional manager. Welcome to our flagship." He stopped mid-sentence. I'd pulled out the shirt from my plastic bag, the same shirt from yesterday, still with its missing button, and held it up between us. "I'd like to return this," I said calmly. Derek's eyes flicked from the shirt to my face, and I could see him trying to process. The suit didn't match the request. The entourage didn't match the shirt. Something was wrong with this picture, but his brain couldn't quite figure out what. Of course, sir. Let me get someone to help you with that." "You helped me yesterday," I said. "Don't you remember?" And then I watched it happen. The moment of recognition. His eyes widened slightly, and he looked at my face more carefully, seeing past the expensive suit to the features beneath. The same features that had been hidden under stubble and a stained hoodie. But you were homeless." I finished for him. "Trash? Not worth serving?" "Yes, Derek, that's what you said. You told me you don't serve trash here. You tore up my receipt. You threatened a good employee with termination for trying to help me." The color was draining from his face now, replaced by a sickly pallor. Around us, the other staff members were frozen, watching this confrontation unfold. There must be some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding. I have it all on tape. Every word, every laugh, every celebration of cruelty. Would you like to hear it?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Derek's voice filled the store, crystal clear. "Did you see his hands? Shaking like a leaf. Probably going through withdrawals." Chloe's laughter. "I thought he was going to cry when you tore up the receipt. Every return we reject keeps us under the cap, and if we stay there through month end, we all get the platinum bonus." "That old lady yesterday? The one with the walker? She literally cried. Walked out with a defective product because she was too confused to fight back." The recording played for everyone to hear. Every employee, every early customer who'd been allowed in. Everyone heard exactly what kind of managers they'd been working for. When it finished, the silence was absolute. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That was taken out of context. You can't just record people without one-party consent state. I interrupted. "I was part of that conversation, even if you didn't know it. The recording is perfectly legal. And context doesn't help you, Derek. There's no context in which celebrating an elderly woman's tears makes you anything other than what you are. A cruel, fraudulent bully. Who the hell are you?" His voice was desperate now, searching for some angle, some explanation that would make sense of this nightmare. I reached up and adjusted my lapel pin, the small gold Aurelia logo, making sure it caught the light. "My name is Elias Thorne. I'm the founder and CEO of Aurelia Clothiers. And you, Derek Vance, have been systematically destroying everything I built." The words landed like bombs. I watched Derek process them, watched his brain try and fail to reconcile the homeless man from yesterday with the CEO standing before him. Around us, employees gasped. Someone dropped something that shattered on the marble floor. Chloe Miller had emerged from the back office, drawn by the commotion. She froze when she saw me, when she saw Derek's stricken face, when she heard the recording still echoing in everyone's minds. "Mr. Thorne," Derek stammered, his salesman's smile trying desperately to reassert itself. "Sir, if I'd known it was you, I never would have." "That's exactly the problem." I cut him off, my voice cold enough to frost glass. "If you'd known it was me, you would have behaved differently. You would have been helpful, professional, kind. Because you don't treat people with respect. You treat positions of power with respect. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught." "That's not true. Tell me, Derek, how many other people did you reject yesterday? How many valid returns did you deny to keep your numbers low? How many customers did you humiliate, threaten, or drive away because they didn't meet your standards of wealth?" He didn't answer. "I'll tell you. According to the data I pulled last night, you personally rejected 47 valid returns in the past month. 47 people who followed policy, who had legitimate issues, who deserved help. And you turned them all away. Not because they were wrong, but because rejecting them helped your profit margins and triggered your performance bonuses. I turned to address the entire store. Every employee here should know. Derek Vance and Chloe Miller have been committing fraud. They've been manipulating return rates to artificially inflate profits and trigger performance bonuses. They've been systematically discriminating against customers based on appearance and presumed wealth. And they've been bullying staff members who tried to do the right thing. Sarah had appeared from somewhere in the back. She was staring at me with wide eyes, her hand over her mouth in shock. I looked directly at her. Sarah Jenkins, you tried to help me yesterday. You were kind, professional, and compassionate, even though your manager threatened to fire you for it. That's the kind of employee Aurelia needs. That's who we're supposed to be. Then I turned back to Derek. You, on the other hand, are fired. Effective immediately. You can't. I can. I'm the CEO. I own this company. And you're done. I nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward with a folder. These are your termination papers. For cause: corporate fraud, discrimination, harassment, and systematic violation of company policy. You'll receive no severance, no recommendations, and if you attempt to sue, we will countersue for every penny you've stolen through fraudulent bonus claims. Derek's face had gone from pale to red. This is bullshit. You can't prove. We can prove everything. We have your conversations on tape. We have the rejected returns documented. We have 37 customer complaints that you suppressed. We have testimony from staff members you've bullied. And we have security footage of you tearing up a valid receipt and threatening an employee. I leaned in slightly. You're finished, Derek. Not just here. Everywhere. Because I'm going to make sure every luxury retailer in this city knows exactly what kind of manager you are. Chloe Miller, I continued, turning to the blonde woman who'd been trying to edge toward the exit. You're fired too. Same terms. Same reasons. Security will escort you both out. The two corporate security officers stepped forward. This is insane. Derek was shouting now, his composure completely shattered. You can't do this. I have rights. I'll sue you for wrongful termination, for defamation, for... Sue away, I said calmly. You'll lose. And every lawsuit will make your crimes more public. Your choice. Security took Derek's arm and Chloe's. They were being led toward the door, Derek still protesting, Chloe silent and shell-shocked. At the threshold, Derek turned back one last time. You know what? Screw you, Thorne. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a rich asshole playing dress-up. In a week, you'll forget all about this. In a month, you'll hire someone exactly like me because my numbers were the best you had. This company needs people like me. I walked up to him, close enough that only he could hear my next words. This company needed people like you, I said quietly. Past tense. Because I'm changing everything. The metrics, the culture, the values. I'm going to make sure that what you did here never happens again in any Aurelia store. And in a year, when this company is stronger and more profitable than ever because we treat people with dignity, I'm going to think about you. I'm going to remember you as the cautionary tale. The example of what we used to be and will never be again. Derek had no response to that. Security escorted him and Chloe out onto the sidewalk. Through the windows, I watched them being loaded into a waiting car, their careers in luxury retail over before lunchtime. I turned back to the assembled employees. They were staring at me with a mixture of awe, fear, and confusion. Everyone listened to me, I said, projecting my voice to fill the store. What you just witnessed is what happens when someone forgets why we exist. Aurelia Clothiers was not founded to make rich people feel superior. It was founded to give everyone, the chance to feel dignified. A good suit is armor against a world that judges too quickly. That was my vision 30 years ago, and that's going to be our mission going forward. I paused, making eye contact with as many people as possible. I know some of you were afraid to speak up. Afraid of Derek, afraid of losing your jobs. I understand that. But fear ends today. Starting now, this store, all our stores, will have new policies. If you see discrimination, you report it. If you see fraud, you report it. If you see cruelty, you report it. And you will be protected, not punished, for doing the right thing. Sarah raised her hand tentatively, and I nodded at her. Mr. Thorne, what happens to us now? To this store? This store is going to be our flagship again. In the right way. And you, Sarah Jenkins. I walked over to her. You're going to help make that happen. How would you feel about a promotion to store manager? Her eyes went wide. What? But I've only been here 8 months. And in 8 months, you've shown more integrity than Derek showed in 4 years. This isn't about tenure. It's about values. Are you interested? Yes, she said, her voice gaining strength. Yes, Mr. Thorne. I am. Good. Marcus will work with you on the transition. You'll receive full training, a significant raise, and the authority to hire or fire as you see fit to build a team that reflects our real values. I turned to Amanda Chun. Amanda, I understand you've been trying to warn corporate about Derek for months. Thank you for not giving up. I'm going to need your help restructuring management across all locations. She nodded, smiling for the first time since I'd met her. Finally, I turned to Richard Fordham, the VP of Sales who'd overridden Amanda's warnings. Richard, you and I are going to have a conversation in my office today about how numbers without ethics are worthless and how ignoring warnings about toxic managers makes you complicit in their toxicity. He had the grace to look ashamed. But first, I said, pulling out the shirt from yesterday one more time, I need to complete a transaction. I walked to the service counter and laid down the shirt. Sarah came behind the counter, still looking dazed but professional. I'd like to return this, I said with a slight smile. There's a button missing, and I need the cash for something important. She smiled back, understanding the symbolism. Of course, sir. Do you have your receipt? I laid out the torn pieces that Derek had destroyed. She carefully taped them together, scanned the barcode, and processed the return without hesitation. $42.99, she said, counting out the bills. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I took the money and held it up. This $43 is going to the employee who showed me kindness yesterday despite being threatened. Sarah, consider this the first deposit in a new company-wide fund, the Dignity Fund. Any employee who goes above and beyond to help a customer in need will receive recognition and a bonus from this fund. And it starts with you. I handed her the cash. Mr. Thorne, I can't. You can, and you will. You earned it by being the person Aurelia employees should be. The other staff members burst into applause. Not the polite, obligatory clapping of corporate events, but genuine, enthusiastic applause. I looked around at their faces, no longer afraid, no longer resigned to toxicity, but hopeful. This was the company I'd meant to build. This was Aurelia, reborn. 3 months later, I stood in the same flagship store, but everything had changed. The marble floors still gleamed, the clothes still hung like artwork, the sandalwood scent still perfumed the air. But the atmosphere was completely different. Where there had been tension and fear, now there was warmth. Where there had been discrimination, now there was welcome. Sarah Jenkins had transformed the store. She'd hired 3 new associates, all people who'd been rejected by other luxury retailers for not fitting the image. One was a formerly homeless veteran. Another was a woman in her 60s who'd been told she was too old for retail. The third was a young man with visible tattoos that most luxury brands considered unprofessional. All 3 were exceptional employees, treating every customer with the dignity I'd always envisioned. The store's customer satisfaction rating had gone from 3.2 to 4.9. The return rate was a healthy 4.3%, normal, honest, reflecting real issues rather than manipulated metrics. And the profits? They'd increased. Turned out that treating people well was actually good for business. Who knew? Marcus walked up beside me, holding a tablet. Quarterly reports are in. Flagship store is up 18% in revenue, 22% in customer retention, and we've had 0 complaints. And the other locations? Amanda's rolled out the new training protocols to 40 stores so far. Early results are promising. We're seeing similar patterns, better satisfaction, better retention, better profits. And Richard Fordham? Marcus smiled slightly. He accepted the early retirement package you offered. Gracefully, I might add. I think watching Derek get fired scared him straight. Good. Fear of consequences is a start. Internalizing ethics is the goal. I watched Sarah help a young couple select wedding attire. She was patient, enthusiastic, treating their budget limitations as a fun challenge rather than an obstacle. When they left with their purchases, they were smiling, genuinely happy. That's what I'd wanted to build. That's what we were becoming again. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I'd been expecting this. Luxury retail manager exposed for systematic fraud and discrimination. Derek Vance faces criminal charges. The story had broken that morning. Everything, the recordings, the data, the complaints, had been released to the press. Derek's name and face were plastered across every business publication, every social media platform. He tried to fight back, hired an expensive lawyer, threatened a defamation lawsuit. But truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and we had the truth on tape. Last I heard, he was working at a call center in New Jersey. Fitting. Chloe Miller had disappeared from social media entirely. No one in the luxury retail world would touch her. Justice, I thought, could be brutal. But it was still justice. Elias. Sarah approached me, looking both nervous and excited. Do you have a minute? Always. She led me to the service counter and pulled up something on the computer. I wanted to show you this. We started tracking something new. Acts of exceptional kindness. Employees going above and beyond, not because it helps sales, but because it's the right thing to do. The screen showed a list of entries. Marissa spent an hour helping an elderly customer pick out a gift for his wife, who has Alzheimer's. The customer cried when she found the perfect scarf. James noticed a customer was embarrassed about their budget and quietly applied a staff discount to help them afford a suit for a job interview. Sarah stayed after hours to hem pants for a customer who needed them for a funeral the next day. This, Sarah said, this is what we're becoming. This is the Aurelia I'm proud to work for. I felt something tight in my chest loosen. Pride. Relief. Hope. Thank you, Sarah, for believing in this. For making it real. Thank you for giving me the chance. For seeing past. She gestured at herself. Whatever Derek saw when he looked at people like me. Derek saw liability. I see assets. There's a reason you're running this store, and he's unemployable. She smiled. I heard he tried to apply here under a fake name last week. Did you reject him? Immediately. But I was kind about it. Told him we were looking for candidates with proven integrity. I laughed. A real laugh that felt good. That's perfect. That's exactly the right amount of mercy and justice. A customer entered, a young man in paint-stained jeans and a faded t-shirt. Sarah's newest hire, the veteran named Marcus, no relation to my COO, immediately approached him with a genuine smile. Welcome to Aurelia. How can I help you today? No judgment. No hesitation. Just service. I watched the interaction unfold. The young man was nervous, clearly uncomfortable in such an expensive space. But Marcus put him at ease, helped him find what he needed, never once made him feel lesser. By the time the young man left with a single tie, a modest purchase, he was smiling. Confident. Like he mattered. That's what a good store does. That's what we were built to do. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I answered anyway. Mr. Thorne? The voice was elderly, male, uncertain. This is Harrison. Thomas Harrison. I don't know if you remember me, but I was in your store a few months ago buying shirts for my grandson. Mr. Harrison. I remember. How can I help you? I saw the news about that manager getting fired. The one who was rude to your employee when she was helping me. And I wanted to say thank you. For caring. For making it right. My grandson got that job, by the way. He said the shirt gave him confidence. Made him feel professional. That's wonderful, Mr. Harrison. Congratulations to your grandson. There's something else. I used to be a manager at a department store, back in the day. And I saw what you did. How you went undercover. How you actually cared about how people were treated. That's rare, Mr. Thorne. That's special. And I just wanted to tell you that it mattered. What you did mattered. I had to clear my throat before I could respond. Thank you for calling, Mr. Harrison. That means more than you know. After I hung up, I looked at Marcus, my COO. We're doing it, I said. We're actually fixing this. One store at a time. One employee at a time. One customer at a time. It's going to take years. Then we have years. I looked around the store one more time. At Sarah managing with kindness. At Marcus, the veteran, serving with dignity. At customers being treated like human beings rather than walking profit margins. This was the company I'd meant to build. This was the vision I'd almost lost. But I'd found it again, in the most unlikely place. By becoming invisible, by experiencing my own stores the way the forgotten and dismissed experience them. Sometimes you have to lose everything, even if only in disguise, to remember what matters. Sometimes you have to be humiliated to understand the value of dignity. Sometimes you have to hit bottom to find the foundation again. I'd been Elias Thorne, CEO, living in a tower 73 floors above the world. Then I'd been Arthur, Invisible Man, seeing how the world really worked. Now I was something else. Something better. I was Elias Thorne, CEO, who remembered what it felt like to be Arthur. And I would never forget again. 1 year later, the banner above the flagship store read, Aurelia Clothiers, First Annual Dignity Awards. Inside, the store had been transformed into an event space. Every employee from every location had been invited. The press was there. Customers who'd written touching stories about exceptional service were there. And at the center of it all was a new addition to the store, a bronze plaque mounted on the wall near the service counter. It read, Asterisk, in memory of what we almost became, and in celebration of what we are. A company that believes every person deserves dignity, respect, and kindness. No exceptions. No excuses. No compromise. Founded 1995, refounded 2025 asterisk. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Sarah was in the front row, now regional manager, overseeing 15 stores. Next to her was Amanda Chen, now VP of Culture and Ethics. Throughout the crowd were employees who'd stood up for kindness when it wasn't profitable, who'd chosen people over metrics, who'd believed in the mission even when the system fought against them. Thank you all for being here, I began. A year ago, I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that success without integrity is just organized theft. That profit without people is just exploitation with better marketing. And that a company is only as good as how it treats its most vulnerable customers. I paused, looking at the plaque. We almost lost our way. We almost became the kind of place that measures worth by wealth. But we didn't, because of all of you. Because you refused to forget that behind every transaction is a human being with a story, a struggle, a dream. I saw some people wiping their eyes. Good. This should be emotional. Tonight, we're honoring 20 employees who went above and beyond this year. But really, we're honoring a principle. That kindness is not weakness. That service is not servitude. That treating people with dignity is not just right. It's revolutionary. The awards were given. Stories were shared. Tears were shed. But the moment that mattered most came at the end, when a young woman approached me. She was probably 20, wearing clothes that had seen better days, holding a piece of paper in trembling hands. Mr. Thorne? I'm Emily. This is probably weird, but I wanted to show you this. She handed me the paper. It was a job offer letter from Aurelia Clothiers, signed by Sarah Jenkins. 3 months ago, Emily said, I was homeless, living in a shelter, trying to get back on my feet. I walked into your store to ask about job openings, and I was terrified because I looked like someone who'd been living in a shelter. But Sarah didn't see that. She saw me. She gave me a chance. And now I have this job, and an apartment, and hope. She was crying now, but smiling through the tears. You built something special, Mr. Thorne. You built a place where people like me get chances. Where dignity isn't reserved for people who can afford it. Where kindness is the currency that matters. I pulled her into a hug, this young woman who reminded me so much of who I used to be. You earned that job, Emily. You earned every opportunity. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. As the event wound down, I found myself standing alone by the plaque, thinking about Derek Vance and Chloe Miller and all the people who'd forgotten that business is about people. They'd thought they were winning when they rejected returns and humiliated customers and triggered their bonuses. But they'd lost something more valuable than money. They'd lost their humanity. I'd almost lost mine too, in the climb to the top. But I'd found it again, in a stained hoodie and worn sneakers, standing at a counter being treated like trash. Sometimes you have to experience the worst of humanity to remember the best. Sometimes you have to be invisible to see clearly. Sometimes you have to fall to remember how to rise with integrity. I touched the plaque one more time, feeling the cold bronze beneath my fingers. We refounded this company today, I whispered to the empty store. And we're going to keep refounding it every single day. Because the moment we stop fighting for dignity is the moment we become what we almost were. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky. 73 floors above, my old office sat empty. I'd moved to a smaller space on the 20th floor, closer to the ground, closer to the people. And somewhere in that city, there were people struggling, fighting, trying to survive with dignity intact. Tomorrow, some of them would walk into an Aurelia store, and they would be seen. They would be valued. They would be treated like they mattered. Because they did matter. Everyone did. That was the lesson. That was the victory. That was justice. Not the brutal kind that destroys, but the redemptive kind that rebuilds. Evil had been punished. Derek and Chloe would carry the consequences of their cruelty for years. But more importantly, good had been rewarded. Sarah had risen. Emily had hope. Thousands of customers had been treated with dignity. The karma had balanced, not through revenge, but through reformation. And in the end, that was the most satisfying justice of all, not just punishing the wicked, but creating a world where wickedness couldn't thrive. I walked out of the store into the night, just another person in expensive clothes on a city street. But I knew something they didn't. I knew what it felt like to be invisible, and I would never forget. Never again.